Captain Sarah Chen had only come to get her coffee. But when the cafeteria worker handed her the cup, Sarah saw the burn scars on his hands. Her heart stopped. Those scars were very familiar. Burns from jet exhaust, the kind only seen on very experienced pilots. But wasn't this man just an ordinary cafeteria worker? Or was he the legendary Top Gun pilot Frank Maverick Anderson? Today I'll share with you the story of a legend hiding at an Air Force base and the young pilot who recognized him. Before the video begins, please let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, please subscribe. Edwards Air Force Base was a massive air base located in the California desert. Thousands of personnel, hundreds of aircraft, and dozens of different units. At the heart of the base was the pilot cafeteria, where pilots ate, rested, and socialized. And in that cafeteria, there was a quiet man who had been working for 8 years. Frank Anderson was 58 years old, gray-haired, medium height. He washed dishes in the cafeteria, cleaned tables, quietly did his job. He never complained, never showed up late, never caused problems. The staff called him Joe because few people knew his real name. The pilots had gotten used to him. That ordinary cafeteria worker, always there, always in the same place. Some would say, hello. Others paid no attention. Frank seemed to prefer it that way. Quiet, invisible, never bothering anyone. Cafeteria manager Carol Martinez was very pleased with Frank. My most reliable worker, she'd say, never causes problems, does perfect work. She didn't know much about Frank's past. She only knew he'd started work 8 years ago. His references were clean, and he lived alone in a small house off base. That Monday morning, Captain Sarah Chen came to the cafeteria for breakfast. Sarah was 32 years old, a talented F-16 pilot, Top Gun graduate, very experienced, and a rapidly rising officer in her career. With her long brown hair, sharp intelligence, and determined stance, she commanded attention. While waiting in the coffee line, she could see the section where Frank worked. The man was quietly washing dishes, not talking to anyone. Sarah hadn't paid much attention to him before. He was just part of the cafeteria. When her turn came, Frank prepared the coffee cup. "Your coffee, ma'am," he said, his voice low and calm. Sarah took the cup. "Thank you." At that moment, as Frank extended the cup, Sarah saw his hands, and her heart stopped. On his hands were very specific burn scars, irregular but very familiar. Sarah had seen these before, the type of burn scars only seen on very experienced pilots, especially those exposed to jet exhaust. "Your hands," Sarah began. Frank immediately pulled his hands back. "Old accident, kitchen accident." But Sarah wasn't convinced. A kitchen accident wouldn't leave those kinds of burn scars. These were burns from jet exhaust. Very high temperature, very specific shape. "What kind of accident?" Sarah asked. "Doesn't matter. Long time ago." Sarah didn't insist. But she couldn't get it out of her mind. Those burn scars were very familiar. And the man's face seemed familiar too, as if she'd seen him before. That day, after finishing her duties, Sarah went to her office. She opened her computer and checked the base's personnel records. Frank Anderson. Started work 8 years ago. Previous work experience, kitchen worker in various restaurants, military background, not specified. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with this. She went through her own files, photos, magazines, articles from Pilot Academy, and finally she found it. An Aviation Week magazine from 1995. On the cover, an F-14 Tomcat pilot. Headline, "Top Gun's Best, The Legend of Maverick." The pilot in the photo was young, handsome, strong. But the facial features were familiar, very familiar. Sarah read the article. Captain Frank Maverick Anderson, one of Top Gun's most successful graduates, shot down 12 enemy aircraft in the Gulf War. A legendary pilot. Sarah's breath caught. Was that quiet man in the cafeteria the legendary Top Gun pilot? Frank Maverick Anderson. The next day, Sarah went to the cafeteria early. She observed Frank. His movements, his posture, his alert gaze. Yes, he was a pilot. He had the stance of someone who had spent long years in a cockpit. When Sarah got to the coffee line, Frank prepared the cup again. "Hello," Sarah said. "You were here yesterday too?" "Yes, I'm here every day." "The coffee was very good. Have you been making it long?" Frank hesitated. "For a while." "Where did you learn to make coffee?" "I've worked in various places." Sarah didn't ask more questions, but throughout that day, she observed Frank. Every movement of the man carried a pilot's precision, very careful, very calculated. That evening, Sarah deepened her research. She tried to find Frank Maverick Anderson's file, but there was something strange. After 2001, there were no records. It was as if the man had suddenly disappeared. Finally, she contacted an old commander. Retired Colonel Mike Roberts had been an instructor at Top Gun. "Colonel Roberts, do you remember Frank Anderson?" "Maverick? Of course I remember him. He was one of my best students. Why are you asking?" "I found him. He's working in the cafeteria." There was a long silence on the phone. "Sarah, you'd better not open that subject." "Why?" "Because Maverick's story is complicated, and he chose to be forgotten." "But why? He was a legendary pilot." "Some legends end painfully. So did Maverick." Roberts didn't give more details, but Sarah's curiosity had increased. The next week, Sarah tried to talk to Frank more, but the man was very cautious. He only gave necessary answers. "Have you been here long?" Sarah asked. "Yes, a few years." "Do you like it here?" "Quiet, peaceful." "Have you ever seen planes before?" Frank's hand stopped. He slowly placed the cup on the table. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. There are a lot of planes here." "I've seen them, from a distance." "Have you ever thought about flying?" Frank looked at Sarah. For a moment, a different expression appeared in his eyes. Longing, pain, loss? "No, flying is dangerous." That night, Sarah researched again. This time she looked at different sources, old newspaper archives, accident reports. And finally, she found it. A news story from 2001. Top Gun pilot in accident. The article said Frank Anderson had crashed during a training flight, his wife had died, and he had been seriously injured. Afterward, it stated he had given up being a pilot and retired. Sarah understood everything. Frank, at the peak of his career, had lost what he loved most, his wife and his ability to fly, and since that day, he had been hiding. The next day, Sarah approached Frank, but this time in a different tone. "Frank," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you." "Something wrong?" "No, but I know who you are." Frank's expression changed. "I don't know what you mean." "Maverick, you're Frank Maverick Anderson." Frank froze. He didn't say anything. "Top Gun graduate, Gulf War hero, legendary pilot." "Wrong person," Frank said. "No, the burn scars on your hands, your posture, your gaze. You're a pilot, a very good pilot." Frank looked around. Nobody else was there. "This isn't the place to talk," he said. "Where should we talk?" "Tonight, off base, Rick's Diner, 8 o'clock. Sarah nodded. "I'll be there." That evening, Sarah went to Rick's Diner. It was a small, quiet place. Frank was sitting in a corner with cold coffee in front of him. Sarah sat next to him. "Hello, Maverick." Frank gave a bitter smile. "I haven't heard that name in a long time." "Why are you here, Frank? Why are you hiding?" Frank took a sip of his coffee. "Because Maverick died in 2001. That accident. Yes, that accident. I was on a training flight with my wife, Susan. She was also a pilot, very talented, very beautiful, and a woman I loved very much." Sarah listened quietly. "We had engine failure. We thought we could make it out, but Susan's ejection seat didn't work. I got out, she didn't. I'm sorry. After that day, I couldn't fly. When I got in the cockpit, I saw her. I heard her voice. Flying was no longer life. It was hell." Frank took a deep breath. "I retired. I hid. Because everyone thought I was a hero, but I felt like a murderer. I couldn't save my wife." Sarah could understand Frank's pain, survivor's guilt. Many pilots experienced it. But why work in the cafeteria? Because I find peace there, serving pilots, supporting them. I can't fly, but at least I can help them. Don't you ever miss it? Flying? Frank's eyes filled with tears. Every day, but without Susan, it has no meaning. The two people sat quietly. Then Sarah spoke. Frank, you're still a legend. Working in the cafeteria doesn't change that. No, Sarah. The legend died. I'm just Frank now, the guy who makes coffee. But if the pilots knew who you were, do you know how they'd react? They shouldn't know. Let the past stay in the past. Sarah understood. Frank had hidden himself to deal with his pain, and she respected that. I'll keep your secret, she said. But I want you to know, you're still a hero. Thank you, Sarah. After that, Sarah's relationship with Frank changed. They were no longer just customer and worker. They had become friends. Sarah would occasionally talk to Frank, checking on his condition. One day, Sarah made a special offer to Frank. Frank, would you like to fly with me? What? As a passenger, just a ride. Maybe it would be good for you. Frank thought, I can't fly. You won't fly, you'll just ride. No, too risky. Frank, you're one of the best pilots. Still, you just haven't been given the chance. Sarah, you don't understand. I can't fly anymore. But Sarah didn't give up. She tried to convince Frank for weeks, and finally, Frank agreed. That day, Frank got on a plane for the first time in 20 years, in the back seat of the F-16 behind Sarah. His heart was beating very fast. Are you ready? Sarah asked. I don't think so. Trust me. The plane took off. Frank saw the landscape below, desert, mountains, sky, and suddenly he remembered the old days, that feeling he missed. How do you feel? Sarah asked. Scared, but also excited. Good. That's normal. The flight lasted 30 minutes. Frank didn't speak. He just looked around, felt, remembered. When they landed, Frank's eyes were filled with tears. How was it? Sarah asked. Amazing, but also painful. Why? Because I remembered Susan, the days we flew together. Sarah touched Frank's shoulder. Maybe remembering her isn't a bad thing. Maybe. From that day on, there was a small change in Frank. He still worked in the cafeteria, but now he smiled a little more. He talked to the pilots a little more. One day, a young pilot approached him. Hello, I'm Lieutenant Johnson. I'm new here. Hello, I'm Frank. The coffee is very good. Have you been making it long? Frank smiled. For a while. But my real job is serving you. Thank you. That's very valuable. After Johnson left, Frank thought about himself. Maybe serving was as valuable as flying. Maybe here in the cafeteria, he could be a pilot in a different way. Months passed. Frank was still hiding his past, but now he was more at peace. His friendship with Sarah continued, and she was very helpful to him. One day, Sarah surprised Frank. She framed an old photograph, the 1995 Aviation Week cover, young Maverick in front of the F-14. This is for you, Sarah said. Frank looked at the photo. He didn't say anything for a long time. I was very young, he finally said, and very talented. Yes, I was. You still are. Frank smiled. Thank you, Sarah. I'll keep this photo. At home? No. In my heart. That night, Frank put the photo on his table. He looked at it for a long time, then he also put Susan's photo next to it. Hello, my love, he said to the photo. I flew today. Not with you, but I flew. And I felt you. Maybe now I should live for both of us. The next day, Frank worked in the cafeteria as usual. But now there was a different energy, more positive, more alive. When a pilot thanked him, Frank replied, You're welcome. I know how important flying is. Are you also a pilot? Frank thought. I used to be, long time ago. What aircraft? F-14, Tomcat. The pilot's eyes widened. Wow, legendary aircraft. Yes, it was a very special aircraft. Frank, for the first time that day, had talked about his past, and he felt good. When Sarah saw this, she was very happy. How do you feel? She asked. Better, much better. Maybe you're finally starting to truly heal. Maybe. Frank was no longer hiding himself. He still worked in the cafeteria, but now he was at peace with his past. And maybe in the future, he could do new things. This story shows us that even when pain is very great, healing is possible. Frank Maverick Anderson, after experiencing his greatest loss, had hidden himself. But with the support of a friend, he had managed to return to life. Real strength is getting up after falling down. Frank had gotten up too, in a different way, but he had gotten up. So have you ever known someone like this? Someone who hid after a great loss, but then got back on their feet? Tell us about them in the comments.